what? You're questioning us? That's anti-Semitism. And that would shut most people up, except it didn't shut us up. Because my response is, yeah, but you're anti-Gentile. I mean, do you ever discuss that? Do you ever even see it in print? I mean, come on. You've not treated the Gentiles here very well. Let's hear somebody talk about that. No, My name is Father Paul Ouderkirk. I'm here at St. Bridget's, Postville, have been since the day after the raid. And I was pastor when Stephen Bloom was just finishing his book, and got to know him because he came and interviewed me once, of all things, on Wisconsin Public Radio. But I've always felt that his book was kind of prophetic, because he was looking at Postville before the raid. He was telling some actual accounts of things that happened, and he was pulling no punches on the state of the workers at the plant, Agriprocessors. And in his vision of how that plant would play out in the future, he predicted problems, and certainly he was right. So I see it as somewhat prophetic, because anybody could have read it. And
but as you mentioned, we discussed it, he was actually an individual of Jewish descent, and one issue to all this is the Hasidic Jews, the Chabad. Could you discuss your sense of what's been happening, and what does that play a factor in this, their attitude? I've talked to a few local people already. Give me some comments, please.
well, first of all, you should know I'm the only one on our staff who ever toured the plant. And as far as the Chabad and their work at the plant, in my work as a missionary, I ended up in Texas and worked there for 2 years and toured a good many meat processing plants. Pilgrim's Pride, Chickens, and you name it, Tyson's. And altogether maybe a dozen different meat processing plants. This one, without question, was the dirtiest, most unsafe one I've ever been through. I couldn't see why there weren't more accidents, because they paid so much attention on loading meat up and shipping it off to Chicago and New York, and not on worker safety. They didn't have earplugs for the workers. Many of them did not have safety gloves. They all had to buy their own rubber bibs to protect against blood and so on, clean their own uniforms. I knew that there was going to be major problems, and it was directly connected to the way the Hasidic Jews here were running that plant. There were lies. In the second of the tour that I had, it was probably about in 2003, 2002, the guide told me directly, and I couldn't believe it, our goal is to become the largest kosher plant in the world and control all the meat that goes in to Israel. And then when I saw how they were breaking all the kosher rules in the book of Leviticus and their own religious texts, it just staggered the imagination that this could be happening.
The people, so you saw the people were treated horribly there, the workers? I mean, any other incidents or examples of...
I'm not a doctor, but while I was pastor here, on a regular basis, I had people coming in saying, I can't lift my arm. Young people with cuts. And right behind our rectory here is the offices of a doctor who was doing a lot of work for the plant, where they could go and get a Band-Aid or get something sprayed on, and then the plant would say, be back to work tomorrow or there won't be any job for you. I saw that on a regular basis, so it's
Well, has Agriprocessors taken any responsibility in retrospect for anything? I mean, they had. Could you discuss the federal raid? Let's go that way, please.
well, the raid happened on May 12th, about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was at that time praying in the chapel of Loras College in Dubuque. And the next day I was up here thinking, well, I've been through 2 other raids. This can't be any worse than them.
2 other raids here?
The biggest one I was through was in Marshalltown, where they arrested 167 workers. And I thought it would be no bigger than that. When I got here, the whole town was upset. This house that we're in was full of people. The church was full of people. There was fear. The children were crying. They wouldn't go to school. I realized that this was no ordinary raid. I didn't know how many they had taken or what exactly had happened. And for the first week, people would not leave our church. They were too afraid. They were afraid that immigration would go to their apartments, would take their children away from them. Their kids wouldn't even walk to school. We would let them stay in the church, but it's only about 5 blocks over to the school. And the children wouldn't go because they felt that a big black van would pull up and take them.
Were the Hasidic Jews helpful in any way? Did they care about this catastrophe?
I'll tell you how helpful they were. In the beginning, my main work, because I knew so many of them, was to help them get their checks, especially the families of the men who had been arrested. And our backyard was full of people, and I remember this so clearly, that Shalom Rabushkin came down with a handful of checks, huge handful of checks. And he said, I'm going to give you these so that you can pass them out to the people. We don't want them to starve. We never got the checks. His lawyer came right behind him, took them away from us and said, no, there's only 4 legal ways we can give you checks. And what they ended up doing is putting them all in big manila envelopes and mailing or giving them to the post office to put in their boxes, which wouldn't have helped anybody because a lot of men had lived in town here 10, 5, 4 years, and they had changed their addresses. But they didn't change the addresses up at the plant because they picked up their checks personally. So it was up to us to go there, find out whose names were on the checks so we could identify them, bring the checks over here, and help them get cashed at the bank. And that went on for all the rest of May and half of June until the post office said, we can't hold those checks anymore. We've got to send them back. So thousands of dollars that were owed to the workers in vacation time, in overtime, was never paid to them. They never got them because after June the 14th of 2008, we couldn't help them unless they brought other checks in, and we still are helping them because some of the banks, both banks here in town, won't cash a check even if they have a valid ID unless we co-sign.
Just a second. One interesting thing to me, I know something about this. America and our society and Christian society is founded on tolerance, diversity, all those splendid historical, things that we've evolved to that. Now I know the Chabad not only are they segregationists, but they have no respect for tolerance and diversity. It seems like there's a paradox here. Could you discuss that?
Yeah, the paradox is we work closely with the JCA and the JCUA, the Jewish groups from the Twin Cities and Chicago. And they have told me, you will never hear a Hasidic Jew apologize. That is not in their vocabulary. And that is exactly right. I have heard and seen so much that demands an apology from them that was never given. One of the biggest examples would be this. They brought into town, after the plant was raided and was struggling and probably going to close, they brought people from Palau. Now Palau is over by the Philippines. It's has a special status so that the workers there could come here with a work permit, get a job. And when the plant began to close various departments, they dumped them all. The Palauans were raised in a warm climate. It was the middle of winter. It was below zero. And they were being evicted from their apartments because they couldn't pay the rent. So did any of the people who brought them here step forward and say, well, we'll help you out? No, they did not. Did the city? No, they did not. Who did? The man who was the voice of Postville on the local radio station. He took them in. He took about 30 of them in who had no place to go.
Is this Mr. Abbas?
Jeff Abbott. Jeff.
I saw him on the internet. Okay.
Yeah, that's him.
Okay.
And as a result of that, the Jews, the Hasidic Jews, were after him. They made a point to say he should be fired. And we went to different meetings where the council who paid his salary, which he wasn't receiving, they hadn't paid him for over a year, and on it sat one of the representatives of the Jewish community, and I never once heard any apology for what I just described about how the Palauans were evicted in the middle of winter. We ask that Mr. Rabashkin give us some aid, because in the beginning, this is a small little parish, and we were taking care of hundreds of people, feeding them, housing them. We couldn't do this. We asked him for some help. He never gave a single penny. Whereas other groups and churches, the area churches, were just Christian beyond belief.
And this gentleman was a Chabad member?
Shalom Rabushkin was the head of the plant.
He would not give a dime for
Not a dime. I sat at a meeting where we asked him point blank for $100,000. He never gave any of it. He said, well, we're already, and he, by the way, was not at this meeting. He would never come to any meetings where we could talk to him directly.
Meetings about the problems of the immigrant community.
This was right in the early weeks of the raid, when people were suffering, the children were scared out of their wits, and they weren't working, they had no money. He never gave a penny, and always sent a representative. He would not be present. So we couldn't hold him accountable. Well, they said, we're going apartment to apartment to give them meat. Taking out of our freezer at the plant, we're giving this meat. Well, we found out they were using the meat as a lever, because they were asking us, the people from all over the country were asking, would we do a memorial walk up to the plant? And they wanted to come. People were coming from all over the country. And this was the day of the walk, in the morning, that I went to this meeting. And by that time I knew that they were using the meat as a way to say to the local Hispanic community, don't you dare walk with them or we won't give you any of this meat. It never worked because the ladies who run the food pantry here told us most of that meat was spoiled. Because they dropped some off at the food pantry and they said, the minute you open the carton, you could smell it. We threw it all away. The people soon discovered that this was true and refused to take it. But at the meeting, that's what I asked. I said, stop giving this meat. Whatever else you do, if you don't give us money, stop giving this meat. And show in good faith. Let people make their own decisions. And they did. They didn't give any more, but they also didn't give any money, and nothing at all, nothing.
So everything I've read in Mr. Bloom's book, what you're telling me, some of the local people, I've only heard negative things about the Hasidic community. As far as being good neighbors, is there anything that can be said good about them as far as being neighbors with local, with either the migrant community or the local people, the long-term local people?
No, overall, I think their view of the migrant community here was, as long as they are working at our plant according to the conditions we set down, we're satisfied. But if they complain, if they're injured and they want workman's comp, they're done.
Did you ever speak with any of the Chabad people about your complaints about this?
Yes. And like I said, it was next to impossible to ever sit down with Shalom Rabushkin. And that's who we needed to talk with. These others were just hired hand. We talked to the finance minister after the raid. And Paul Real is our Hispanic minister. He and I went out and up to the plant a number of times until they locked us out. They didn't want us back. We couldn't get back.
Do you know, sir, and do many people in Postville know the worldview of the Hasids over there? I mean, do you know their religion, the details of it, sort of? Do you know what you're up against, I guess, is my question.
We have learned what we're up against.
Could you discuss that? What are you up against?
We know that they have a very strong financial base and that they're a very conservative group, and like most conservatives, that means you have a restricted vision, which is according to your interpretation of the scriptures, and that financially you use other people and consider that a wise thing to do. Make money from ways of dealing with people that other people would not do. Don't pay your debts on time, because if you pay them a little later, you have used your money to make a little more income, then pay your debts when people start squawking about it. And we learned that they have a synagogue here, and that they started their own school system, and that one of the things which they controlled, when I was pastor here, I enjoyed visiting with the kids as they got out of school, because they had high school for boys up to sophomore year, and they had junior high for girls, and the girls especially were fun to deal with.
You're speaking of the Jewish?
Yes.
Okay.
I would time it so I could go to the post office when the school was letting out, because some kids would come over there, and I learned that you could not talk to a Hasidic high school student. They looked upon you as one of the lowest forms of creature on earth. But when it was, as far as the girls, they were like girls everywhere. Fun, laughing. I saw the owner of the Jewish store, Jacob's Table, hold the door so they couldn't get in. And finally she let them in, and they were just laughing and kidding and saying, "Oh, you're as bad as our teacher in school." You wouldn't hear the boys say that. And then I saw that there was a day when all the laughter left the streets of Postville. And I knew we were going to really have some problems. The girls were gone. They didn't want them here to associate with the Goyim. They didn't want that. They were shipped out and added another year to the high school, the boys' high school. And the way in which they dealt with the kids was unbelievable. They became like little puppets.
Keeping them away from local non-Jews.
Correct. I was on one panel with a young Hasidic boy who was a rabbinical student, and never on another one with a young man, because he was so opinionated and so certain of his position that he had no time to listen to anybody else. And I didn't want to be on panels with people like that.
You mentioned some people have had the idea that non-Jews are the lowest form of creatures or something. Can you give me examples of that? Have you seen that kind of treatment around here?
Well,
you or other people or migrants or local people, or what are we speaking of here?
My cars have been trashed twice. And the second time, I caught the young man. He was about a 12-year-old Hasidic male. I surprised him by coming out the back door of the church, and he was on his knees next to my car, but looking under the car of our Hispanic minister. My cars had already been trashed twice. I know then that he was involved in that. And I have no doubt that he was told that something like that is acceptable, because I was not afraid to speak up. I was writing letters to the local newspaper. That's one example. The other example it's sad. They requested permission from the local high school to hold some of their classes, I think mostly physical education classes, in the high school. And I was told by the staff at the school that they never ever cleaned up. They ate candy when there was, for the rest of the school, there was no eating candy. They threw the wrappers on the floor, and they walked out of school and never cleaned them up. It was like, we don't have to do that. Well, yes, you should. Just human courtesy says you should. They didn't show it.
I talked to a city councilman yesterday, formerly, and he told me that none of them would ever cut their grass, do snow removal. They left it to somebody else. So that's systemic, that kind of thing?
Yes, unless they were pressured. And as far as cutting grass, there's a famous picture from our local newspaper of one of the first guys to cut his grass. He bought the lawnmower with the price tag on it and showed him out cutting. But let's just say that the majority did not do that. This street out here is West William Street, and many of them lived along the street, and they left their toys out in the streets, in the front yards, strewn all over. And while some local citizens often criticized the Hispanic community for leaving junk cars or cars they were repairing in the same spot too long, nothing was ever said about the state of the yards of the Hasidic families. And
may I ask, Mr. Bloom wrote his book, and he's of Jewish faith, or at least is born and raised Jewish. Even he has been accused by many in his own community of being an anti-Semite. And just by the passion you have for this injustice that you see, have you ever been called that by these people? And what do you recognize the politics to that?
I wasn't called that personally, but I have no doubt that that's what a lot of them thought. And at one time, I've done a lot of work with immigration papers. And at one time, I was helping so many workers up there fill out papers they needed that they trusted me, I guess, because they appeared at my door one of the big rabbis, who needed a paper. Now, it was my policy always to either charge the Hispanic community or they would make a free will offering. I did the same thing for him as I did for them, and he walked out without paying a penny. There's no doubt he thought of me as just a useful tool. And I was surprised that he would even come into the house. But the way they approached it was, well, you should be honored that he is coming to you.
The city councilman told me, he said that the Hasidic community invested or paid some money for the local swimming pool or something and have their own time reserved. Do you know anything about that?
Yes.
That's naked discrimination.
Yes, they did. I don't know what day of the week, but I found that there were certain days when the local kids could not go swimming because, as it were, Shalom had bought this time from the city.
How can they get away with that in this day and age in terms of why did somebody sue?
Or something we've always wondered about, because we requested, you see, all of the Hispanic families that we worked with that were Christian Catholics could never get out of work on Christmas and Easter because those were Sundays. And yet when Passover and other feasts came, and there was no work up here, and even during the Passover celebrations, the community, Hispanic community, didn't have any job. But we've requested the plan just to give them an hour off so they go to church on Christmas and Easter, and we're totally ignored. Never once did they listen.
I've read text, Jewish scholarship and stuff, and there was a tradition. I mean, there's a lot of contempt for Christianity in that kind of community. Have you experienced or heard anything or felt that or seen that?
Not directly, only more indirectly, and also from my knowledge of how the workers were treated.
Any specific examples?
Yes, they had a rabbi room in the plant that was off limits to anybody who wasn't Hasidic. While at the same time they had nearly 1,000 workers, they only had one restroom for women, and a lot of times it was plugged up.
What about for men? They didn't have a restroom?
The men also used that one for women, but the men had another one. Okay. Whereas the women, many times during work, could not go to the restroom. They either had to go in their pants or hold it. And after the raid, we discovered one woman especially, she had kidney problems. She had to have some serious medical attention just from holding.
And all these people, most or all who were illegal, have no legal recourse in terms of getting back at all this injustice?
Correct.
Nothing they can do.
Nothing they can do.
Is that the reason, in your opinion, why they were hired in the first place?
Oh yes, they knew very early on. We were questioned by some federal officials. Do you people know of human trafficking that was going on in the plant? Well, at the time, I didn't even know what human trafficking was. And I said no. Were they to ask me that now, I would say yes, indeed, because these workers were talking about signs they had seen, even in their little villages, about work. They were saying the sign said, "Come, you'll have free apartment, furnished for a month, so you get established. You will get $10 an hour, and the work you can start right away." All of that turned out to be a lie. So it was trafficking to get them up here, because once they were here and you had a long line applying, it was easier to fire somebody who was causing a little trouble, and then hire one of these new workers. And as a matter of fact, the workforce went from Mexican to Guatemalan because It was easier to control the Guatemalans. They had less education, and they were new arrivals who needed immediately to get to work and have a place to live. Yeah, these were all, this was not happenstance, it was deliberate.
This is a profound exploitation.
Exactly.
Could you elaborate on? And I guess what I'm getting from you and what my feeling is moral outrage. Could you address? I mean, this is a religious community who has dropped the ball 100%. I mean, could you elaborate on the morality of this from a religious community?
Well, as far as the morality goes, I don't understand it because it's not what the average citizen, no matter what their religious persuasion, in this town was used to. And then it came in and trampled on many of the rights that we had, where, especially in regard to paying bills, and I have a lot of experience that never made newspapers, like buying gas one day. The man buying gas on the other pump right next to me said, "Well, you're Father Paul, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." I didn't know him. He said, "Let me tell you this story." And he ended up telling me that the Hasidic community owed him, it was something like $17,000 for work that he had done on their trucks because he had a big crane. And they phoned him and said, "Well, we heard you had this crane and you could do this work for us." He did. And when he called to ask why they weren't paying, he was told, "Well, we don't pay for work like that." He said, "I know, I'll never get any of that money." And that's just one example of the way they were treating people.
How can he get away with that? I mean, why didn't he get small claims courts, lawsuits? I mean, I guess, Mike, is there an intimidation factor here? Because I've been around. I've only been here a couple of days, but my first thing was to go around and just talk to people in the streets. And people are. I'm a stranger. That's one thing. But people are really reluctant to speak about this. Could you discuss that? Are they intimidated? What's happening?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of intimidation, and the reason that people now are reluctant is the plant has been sold. It's now called Agriprocessors, and it is owned by another Jew. I don't know. He says he isn't Hasidic. There's a lot of questions about that. He says he isn't a member of the Rubashkin family. There are questions about that. He does live outside the country. He's from Canada. And so there is this, these are Norwegian Lutheran people. And the mayor isn't helping this because the city council and the mayor are taking a position. Now, don't talk about this to anybody because we have to have time for this new ownership to prove itself. They want to do the right thing. But the more they say that, the more it makes me wonder why or who is afraid to make things more transparent, because it's going right back to the way it was. What is the old saying? The more things change, the more they stay the same. And the change we're seeing is only on the surface. So moral outrage, yes indeed. That you can have an out-of-country, an absentee owner of this plant come in and refuse to sit down with a small group of people and say, let's do what's best for the city and the plant. He's only willing to say, let's sit down and talk about what's best for the plant. Yeah, morally outraged is right.
I saw on the internet that this new mayor was given a sum of money by the last owner over there. Is all politics going on in here too?
Yeah, he received money. He ran for the state legislature and was elected. He was, he's not the only one. There are,
you're the former mayor you're speaking of, okay.
well, the present mayor got money to be elected, come back now as the mayor. So he has a tie to the family because of of financial gifts for his campaign. And there are other politicians too. Even our governor has received money from them. Do you know that there are two outstanding political servants from this state who have never been here? The governor of the state has never been here. The largest raid in the history of Iowa, and he has never been in this community to stand up and say something like, well, there's not a whole lot I can do. I didn't make the immigration laws, but I'm sorry. He has never done that. And the other one is State Senator Harkin. He's never been here.
Are they politically afraid? Is that much to lose? Is that the deal?
Let's just say they are beholding. How far? We don't know. We do know that they have received help.
So economic help from the Hasidic Jews.
Yes. That's on available on the internet and so on.
It seems to me that part of this big play in Postville is money, that plant, versus morality. And that money, the effect of money seems to dominate morality, which is they're getting away with it. Do you have any perspectives on that? Am I on the right track on that? What's your sense?
No, I think you're on the right track. I think that for years this plant sat empty and the town was floundering. This is one of the poorer counties, Almaquis County, in the state of Iowa. And then all of a sudden this new owner comes in and promises that he's going to work all these wonders for the town. And people were content. And when you get too content, you don't notice that all of a sudden he's working more for himself than he is the town. They have their own school system, they have their own store, and they're very segregated. They walk up the sidewalk and want you to step out of the way. And so the contentment then turned into shock, because when the raid took place, everyone thought that it would be on the plant, because everybody knew the conditions inside were so immoral, unjust, and inhumane. But the raid was first aimed at the workers, the most defenseless, the poorest. Then it was aimed at the town. I don't ever find anybody who says that. And even the city doesn't want me saying this. It put Main Street pretty much out of business, to the point where it even helped burn down our very best bakery, and right in the middle of the main street. So there's about 5 or 6 businesses there that just disappeared. And only third was the raid in any way dealing with the immoral conditions at the plant. So yeah, we as a staff are outraged, because that even wouldn't have happened except some national organizations of lawyers and so on got behind this and made it possible for us to retain and help 50-some underage workers and others, but there were 59, I think, total underage workers that were recruited to work in that plant. And Rubashkin said, oh, we don't have any underage workers here. Yeah, right. And they didn't have a pipeline that went from the high school right to the plant. Yeah, right. So if we hadn't, thanks to the generosity of people all over the United States sending us money so we could support and maintain these people and keep the witnesses, those who would be willing, here, the raid would have just bundled them up, deported them. The town would have been left smoking in rubble. And who would have survived? The plant. Then they would have brought in the Palauans and who knows what other groups, and continued to foster the same kind of immoral actions on them.
But so what you seem to be saying is that the main, at least in my view as I listen to you, the main object of criticism in all this escaped, and that's the Hasidic collective that ran that plant.
Exactly.
Could you elaborate on that? What's going on? Why
Well,
did they get off scot-free like that?
I always told Sister Mary, who was the administrator before I came, or while I was retiring, you never have to worry. The biggest lobby in the United States is the Jewish lobby. They'll never raid that plant. Well, when they eventually did, it really wasn't a raid of the plant. It was a raid of the people in the town. And the Justice Department was involved in some of this, that making it possible for the deportation of the potential witnesses without batting an eye. So what's behind it is that we're discovering that there's financially a lot of money behind it that was trying to rescue Rubashkin. And if he hadn't been so, he was inept, he said that he himself admitted. He didn't know how to run a business like this, and it was getting away from him. Because when it started, we had 300-400 workers. That plant could handle that. But when it got up to 900, it couldn't. Part of that plant should be condemned. It was so old. And when I took my tours, the working conditions were horrendous. There was blood flowing on the floor. People who came to me said that they would cut like this with an electric saw, just cutting the legs off chickens that were hanging for 8, 9, 10 hours a day with 1/2 hour off to eat. And those kind of conditions, why wasn't there more done about that? Well, you had, OSHA was in there, there were inspectors in there, the state was in there. Patty Judge, who is now the state attorney general, was in there. What did they do? It appears now they did very little. I guess we trusted them. We're a trusting community here in Northeast Iowa.
You're speaking really morally and honestly, and it's refreshing. I'm impressed. I bless your heart. You're a great, good man. But who has ears to listen to this? I mean, locally or anything. I mean, I've just come out of the sky and dropped on your head here out of nowhere. But this is the kind of stuff that, I lived in Israel for a year, and I have lots to say about Israel, and no one wants to hear. And it's the same parallel. No one wants to hear if it's Jewish. There's like a sensorial censorship about it. Could you discuss what's your struggle in terms of speaking to anybody that counts?
Well, you're raising a good point. I have a connection with the Jewish newspaper, The Forward in New York, because they uncovered this whole story originally. It's refreshing when you talk to those members, reporters, and the staff from that paper. I subscribed to it for a while. Because, like you say, nobody seems to want to go into this prejudice and immoral actions. And I trace it also to Washington, that the lobby must be a lot more powerful than I even thought.
Which lobby?
The Jewish lobby. And as far as the religious faith as it was practiced here, I could not believe some of the things I was hearing. That even in their own households, if a child threw a dish of food on the floor and it was a Sabbath, you couldn't clean it up. So how did they clean it up? Basically, they hired the Russian people that were here at the time, because when they first opened the plant, they didn't want to hire Hispanics. They brought over Russians, Russian Orthodox. And more than one of those ladies told me that the messes that they saw in the houses.
I'm sorry, Russian Orthodox Christians or Orthodox Jews?
They were Orthodox Christians. Because the Hasidic Jews here are all Lubavitchers, Russians. So they had connections. Now there again, I don't know how that all worked out, but it worked for them because they had power to do this through, it has to be through Congress again. It makes you shake your head, especially when you take a look at one big factor. The raid on this town was planned for over 2 years. It had a code name, End Run. Its purpose was to try a new experiment, and that is to charge all the workers with federal aggravated identity theft and use that as a lever to force them, when they were arrested and taken down, prepared for court, to sign voluntary departures that they didn't have to sign. They didn't know that. And to know that that court was set up and lawyers who were, and translators who came, recognized from the beginning it was unjust and immoral. It broke all kinds of constitutional protections against citizens and non-citizens. For what? For what? One could only ask, were they protecting the plant? Were they trying to get this done real quickly so you wouldn't have to ask deeper questions? It's those things, and then the judge involved in all of that, why she didn't recluse herself from the case, because we've talked to translators and lawyers that were at the actual trial in Cattle Congress in Waterloo, who said from the beginning, you could see this was immoral. The decision of their guilt was made before they ever walked in the room. Well, why didn't more of them walk out? Is the same question you're asking me. Why wasn't there more moral outrage here? I think the evil and the workings of the plant had gotten so bad that people were somewhat afraid to speak out.
But what factor in this intimidation or reluctance is the fact that the culprit are these Hasidic Jews? It seems like they're getting an overview. They're like the heart of the problem. It seems that they're never touched as the heart of the problem. Did you discuss that?
I guess as far as we go here, we've been so intense in helping the people whose lives were ruined by the working at the plant and the raid together, that we didn't have time to go into those kind of things. We only have, we trust that our elected officials would do a better job of addressing those things, and instead they're silent. And their silence is speaking volumes. It's
and that silence is related to who the culprit is, the Hasidic Jews.
Yes, and particularly the Rubashkin family. This family apparently has a big financial interest in Crown Heights, New York, and who knows how far it goes. The owner of the plant lives there. Shalom Rubashkin is his son, but the actual owner lives in New York. Now we're hearing that funds are being funneled back to this plant from New York. I mean, why doesn't that stop? They had, they brought in a man to arbitrate and sell the plant when it was bankrupt. I forget the technical term for him. What was he called? He was supposed to be an authority on bankruptcy and selling the plant. Something in me said, he's steering the sale of this plant. He's not going to offer it to the best people who could bring it back up. He's going to steer it. And he steered it to Canada.
And back into the Jewish community
Yeah.
and possibly the Hasids again.
Yeah.
So it's